Yes, it's the king of all utes. Toyota has been making the HiLux since the 1960s. What's that got to do with anything? Well, a lot in my opinion, because it's experience, it's the data. So it's been building this type of vehicle exactly like this for 60 years or whatever. So straight away it knows what works, what doesn't work. No, customers don't like that. We've got a lot of feedback from that they didn't like that. Each HiLux that comes out is an evolution of what's worked best and what's not. And I know Toyota has always been very conservative when it launches new models. This is only a kind of, not even a facelift really, it's just got the new mild hybrid 48 volt technology in the engine, but it's the same 2.8 litre turbo diesel 4-cylinder, basically just has an oversized two-way alternator under the bonnet running off the belt, and it can provide power for the engine, it can start the engine, and it just knocks off the emissions and the fuel consumption a little bit. So this is rated at 7.4 litres per 100 kilometres. The standard non-48 volt version was rated at 8.4. In the real world, it probably doesn't make a huge difference, but I'm averaging, I think, around 9.7 at the moment. But when we go for a drive, I'll have a look at the trip computer. We can have a closer look at that. It's more about Toyota needing to do something. It has to reduce emissions like everybody else, the other car makers, I mean, in order to pass ever-tightening restrictions around the world. So it was either this mild hybrid or a full hybrid system. And I don't think customers would have appreciated a full hybrid yet anyway. I think the complexities, heavier motor and battery and so on, I don't know, I think traditional fans of the HiLux might not have liked that. And that's why they've gone down this kind of safer route where it's just mild. Under the bonnet there, we don't even have a gas strut actually, we've just got the old-fashioned stick, which you could see as pretty pathetic. I think that's pretty pathetic. But who knows, maybe Toyota looked into this. They've got that much data there that they found that fitting gas struts is not good when you're in the outback because they fill up with dust and maybe they break, I don't know. A good old-fashioned stick is always going to work. But you could see that as cost-cutting, way to increase profits. I think the thing with Toyotas is they are very conservative with everything and they make the big profits out of their vehicles, but they have an excellent reputation. So I think that's just been their formula all along. You can either take it or leave it, it doesn't really matter. But the main thing is for you, the customer, is that it works. And a good old-fashioned stick, that's going to work. You can depend on it. This engine though, it looks pretty much exactly the same as the 2.8. It is the same 2.8, but tucked away down there is an starter generator, sorry. So it starts the engine and it's connected up to the belt. And then powering that is a 4.3 amp hour battery, which converts to around 0.3 kilowatt hours, I think. I'll flash up the exact conversion now. So it's only a small battery. Toyota says it weighs around 7.6 kilograms, which is nothing. Go to the gym or something, pick up a 5 kilogram weight or a 10 kilogram weight even. It's not very heavy, so it's not adding a huge amount, but that starter generator would add a bit. The starter generator system is much smoother than a conventional starter motor as well. So a starter motor a little wheel will spin out literally, or poke out, sorry, spin the flywheel and then retract back in using a solenoid and all this sort of stuff. Whereas the starter generator literally just turns the engine and it gets it going. It's very, very smooth. I haven't really heard of a starter motor failing, underneath 100,000 kilometers or even beyond that. So it's probably not that much of an issue, except in the very long term. So it'll be interesting to see how this starter generator lasts in long term, like I'm talking 200,000 kilometers and plus. The official specs say 150 kilowatts and 500 newton meters, just the same. So you're not getting any extra power, but that starter generator does produce 8.4 kilowatts alone and 65 newton meters. Thanks to the hybrid system or mild hybrid system, the idle speed has dropped from 700 to around 600 RPM. So it's just a bit smoother when it's sitting there. Elsewhere, this is the Rogue variant and it looks identical to the regular non-mild hybrid Rogue. It looks very sporty and kind of angry at the front. Those muscular wheel arches help give it some sturdiness and stance on the road, and then it's very functional at the back. With the update, you get a damped tailgate. So you've got two, one on either side, Toyota branded, of course. And it's all fully sealed as well. So this is a rubber seal that connects all the way up. The only problem is you've got to really slam it hard. Even that, I don't think had completely closed it. You've got to, that's quite a bit of force to get that closed. I feel like I'm going to break it, but it's a tough old HiLux. I'm sure it can handle it. And then it's got this marine style of carpet all inside. Now, if I was buying a ute, and I think this is the problem with utes these days, lots of people are buying them and they don't actually need a ute. I think, well, I know they're not as safe in terms of driving dynamics as a conventional sedan or even a good crossover or SUV. Higher center of gravity, usually more kind of industrial strength tires and a full ladder frame chassis. So it doesn't crumple in as well during a car crash. But the thing is, if you need to use the back tray, like if you're carrying things all the time, then you've got no other choice, do you? But if you're not going to use the back tray, then why do you buy a ute? Whereas I think with the Rogue, they've tried to pair up, they've tried to merge SUV and ute as much as they can by fitting this carpet. So you can put, you know, your groceries or whatever in here. I mean, they're still going to roll around, but they're not going to smash against the full metal. You do have some hooks just on the side there, but none at the front because it's got that big the roller shutter in the way kind of thing. And then inside, I think, is probably the most interesting because it is just so basic. There's nothing really special about it. Toyota really needs to update that touchscreen. I get it, they probably don't even want the vehicle to have a touchscreen, and maybe they've found that customers, like the miners and stuff like that, they don't want the touchscreen either, I don't know. But I feel like that was just a decision that they put in at the end. Oh yeah, we better put a touchscreen in it. Let's just get one from the 2014 Toyota Corolla and chuck that in there. And they still haven't updated it yet. And then all of the dashboard, I mean, it does look okay. It's kind of taken from previous model Corollas, kind of. But it's all different textures, but everything is hard plastic. So that's all scratchy hard plastic. Even this fake stitching here, it's all just plastic. Which at first you think, wow, this is really cheap and just nasty in here. But it's, again, I think it's about Toyota with its conservative nature, that it wants it to last. And if you're using this as a work vehicle, smashing tools and, you know, blokes with work boots and stuff, like even below here, it's just a hard plastic, really hard. I wouldn't call it scratchy, but it's definitely just a tough plastic. All down here on the doors, everything is just hard plastic. But that's good because you can scuff your feet up against it. It doesn't have some, you know, suede-like leather or anything like that. It's going to last, or I think it would anyway. Even this steering wheel, it feels like plastic. I mean, it is stitched, so it is leather, I think. It might be vinyl type leather, but it just feels really tough and hard wearing. You could have dirty hands and just grinding all the dirt into that, and it probably wouldn't wear out. Whereas you might get a softer steering wheel in other models, but then do that and it's going to start wearing out pretty quickly. And I feel like that's what Toyota's philosophy is. It doesn't care about extra luxuries. This is not a luxury vehicle. It's a ute. It's a workhorse. It's meant to be anyway. Although, yeah, a lot of them are trying to bridge that gap between SUV and workhorse. In terms of all the layout, apart from that touchscreen, you've got climate control down below. All of the controls are there, so you can change the temperature on both sides, turn the aircon on and off, turn the whole thing off, and fan speed is all there. You don't have to go into that touchscreen at all. And down below, you've got your driving functions. It's got auto stop start, which I actually leave on because of that starter generator. It is just so smooth. You don't even, there's no delay either. As soon as you take your foot off the brake, we'll go for a drive and I'll show you in a sec. Take your foot off the brake and it just like it's kind of like clutch starting a vehicle. You know, when you're just pushing it along, it just starts up. You don't have this waiting time of the starter motor engaging with the flywheel or anything like that. So I don't know, you probably would save a tiny bit of fuel if you spend a lot of time in the city, but if you're driving in the country and so on, I don't think stop start does all that much in the real world. You've also got heated front seats on this one as well. And down below here, you've got your drive mode switch. So just rotate that. You've got a sport mode, and then you've also got multi-terrain select. You've also got a wireless phone charger down there, which is pretty advanced for a Toyota. And then just a single cup holder in the console, little spot for your keys and so on. But it does have pop-out cup holders in the dashboard as well. And then in the back, sorry, I've just got my son's seat in there, but it's actually a good opportunity to show you something. The seat, the baby anchor points, actually I'll go around the other side. The baby anchor points don't go behind the seat. You don't flip the seat forward. You've got to put the top strap through a loop and then to a central mounting point. I find that really annoying. I'd rather just have the ability to tip forward the seats. As a parent, you know, jumping in and out of cars, but I mean, if you own this, you're probably going to have that installed and it just stays there. So it might not be as much of a problem as it is for me changing cars every week. And in the back, it's not the most spacious ute in the class. Like my head's pretty close to that and I'm only 170 centimeters. My head's not near the ceiling, but for me it is. That's actually closer than what I usually see. So if you were pretty tall, you might actually get close to touching the ceiling. The seat is quite comfortable though. It's kind of bucketed slightly when you sit in it. I mean, it doesn't look like it, but it kind of just cradles you just a little bit. And then legroom is not too bad for this class. There is the GWM Alpha Ute. That's definitely bigger than this. And of course the big American trucks. And the Ford Ranger feels a little bit bigger in here compared with this. You do have grab handles, including on the pillar and up above. And you've got climate vents and dual charging ports, USB-C. You've also got these little hooks, which I find very handy, especially in a ute. I don't know about you, but when you put your groceries on the floor, the first corner you go around, it feels like you've just taken on a corner at Le Mans at 200 kilometers an hour, and the groceries just go flying over to the other side. And you think, how can it have that much energy to launch over the other side when I'm not even driving fast, going around a roundabout? So those hooks are really handy because you can just, yeah, stop them from doing that. All right, let's go for a drive now and see what this thing is like. As I said, I think Toyota is very conservative in its approach to vehicle development. It doesn't want to make huge changes because it's just been building the same thing for quite a while, and it knows what is going to work and what's not going to work and what's going to resonate well with its big customer base. Before we get going, let's just have a quick look at this touchscreen. It's probably one of the worst in the class, I reckon. There's nothing special about it. The graphics are average and old. There's no colors there. It's all just blue and black basically, and white. And you can change a few of the vehicle settings and so on. There's your service. You can fiddle around with what you've serviced and whatever. But yeah, I think that's a very basic setup. It's like Toyota didn't even care what screen it has. They've just gone, you know what, we better put a screen in there just so you can have some options to play around with. But pretty much the bare minimum. Starting with the on-road stuff, we'll hit the dirt later on as well. I think the ride quality is not bad. I've driven some utes recently, like that Alpha diesel. That was actually really stiff and it bounced around. This is walking a good balance between comfort and it's still got capability. It's 3.5 ton towing. It feels all right. It doesn't bounce around. Like the wheels don't feel like they're bouncing over the bumps. They're just catching them rigidly and firmly, but not actually bouncing. But we'll check that out properly on the dirt, and we'll hit that jump again and see how it manages. In terms of the actual handling, yeah, it feels good. There's no body roll. I've got a good idea of where the vehicle is on the road. This is quite wide, so you do have to be careful of that or be mindful of that. And the steering is typically Toyota, numb and just do what you're told kind of thing. But I've got a good feeling of what the front wheels are doing. If you push it pretty hard, it does start to understeer a little bit. But yeah, you've got to be pushing pretty hard to do that. At the end of the day, utes aren't really designed for sporty driving, but I would say this is kind of the second best handling utes behind the Amarok and the Ranger twins. It just feels good enough for this style of vehicle, and I feel safe. Like, I don't feel like, oh, is this going to make it around the corner, or should I slow down extra, go extra slow because it's a bit of a truck or whatever. I just feel like it's an SUV basically. So what about that hybrid system? Well, you can't really feel anything. Like, I don't notice that it's a hybrid at all. There's no sort of EV running mode or anything like that. The motor is too small, the E motor I mean, is too small to offer full electric driving, even just momentarily. So you don't really notice. The only thing you do notice sometimes is there's a little surge in torque in between or during gear shifts. So it'll shift up to say 4th or something and be quite low in the RPM, but you can feel this kind of surge, partly due to the 500 Newton meters of torque that the engine produces anyway, but you just feel this surge that's not directly in relation to the revs, and you can feel that that's the electric motor just assisting there. We've got a display for the battery. Now there's your fuel consumption, so it's averaging 9.7 since reset, but there is a display for the battery. So at the moment it's a full battery. Being such a small or weak electric motor, it means that unlike some hybrids out there that have a powerful motor, it doesn't really matter what the battery level is. It's not providing that much assistance anyway, so you don't have this inconsistent power delivery or feeling of power delivery. It just feels the same pretty much all the time, regardless of that battery level. So at the moment it's full battery. from going downhill, and I'll just race up this uphill section. Let's see if we can get that battery down. It goes alright, like it's not the fastest ute by far in this class, but it goes okay. Like the normal SR5 does about 9.5 seconds 0 to 100, which is about the benchmark roughly for this style of vehicle. This is a little bit slower because of the extra weight, I'm guessing, but it feels okay from behind the wheel. You can overtake relatively easy, so long as you're not towing something heavy. I haven't actually used this to tow before, so I don't know what it's like, but without anything in the back and without towing, it feels good. So up this hill, I can feel the extra torque pushing it along. Yeah, like just there, I'm only putting my foot down a little bit on the throttle and it's sort of surging it along. But it is difficult to tell if it's from the diesel, the torque of the diesel, or if it's that electric motor assisting. As the battery level hasn't really dropped down at all. Full throttle. It's not really dropping. So every time I hit the brakes, it's charging back up again anyway. Yeah, it pretty much maintains that state of charge regardless of how you drive. But again, it's such a small electric motor in terms of the power output that it's not providing much anyway. So you don't, I don't know, it's almost a case of why put it there if it's not going to do much. But I think in the lab, you know, the official testing, the emissions and all that, it does just bump it down a little bit. And as I said, 9.7 is not that bad, but I've achieved, you know, 8s in the D-Max anyway. So yeah, I don't know, you need to test it a bit more long term, have it for a month or something like that, and see what it's really like, and compare it to the non-mild hybrid version too. Out on the highway, it's a pretty smooth, comfortable tourer. Like with a lot of utes, they have big side mirrors, so there's a bit of wind noise, turbulence around there. But in general and overall, it is quiet and comfortable. The engine sound is not too bad as well. We're ticking over around 1700 RPM to maintain 110 along the highway. There's no clattering, you know, that typical diesel clatter that you get from diesel engines. There's none of that, but it just sort of roughly burbles. And then if you put your foot down, yeah, it's just got this sort of rough, burbly sound. It's not completely unpleasant, but yeah, it's not the quietest. If you look at the Ranger V6, that's probably the quietest, just because it has more pistons, and those pistons are obviously smaller, so 500cc pistons. This is quite a large 4-cylinder, 2.8, so that's 700cc pistons. That's a pretty big piston, so it's going to make more noise than a smaller capacity unit, in terms of the volume, I mean, and the roughness, I guess, too. But overall, yeah, it just purrs along. I could drive this around Australia pretty easily. The engine noise is not distracting or making it more uncomfortable in any way. In terms of driving comfort and visibility, this is good. I can see around the front very easily, over the bonnet, and I can also see over that side mirror over the top, which I think is quite important. If you've got a blocked blind spot there, you know, you don't know if you're pulling out and what's beneath you, because these are quite high riding vehicles. The only thing that does sort of bug me a little bit is the steering column adjustment. So it does go up and down and in and out, but it needs to come out a little bit more for me anyway. I would like it to be more closer to my chest, so I can roll the seat back a bit further, because it feels like my legs are a little bit bent, more than I want them to be anyway. Okay, so it does start to chew into the battery on the highway, where it doesn't get a chance to charge, like with every hybrid out there at the moment. But I'll just keep an eye on that, and hopefully it goes right down, because I want to see what the performance is like and see if there's any sort of degraded performance with the battery flat. Again, I don't think there will be, because it is just a weak electric motor anyway. I've been driving now for about 15 minutes or 20 minutes or so, with my foot kind of just resting on the throttle. So this has been mostly flat and a bit of uphill, and it hasn't had a chance to charge, but it's staying at that level. It doesn't seem to be, or it doesn't seem to want to drop any lower than that. If I give it some gas up this hill, it still stays at that level, and it feels the same too in terms of acceleration and power. Let's see how it goes on the dirt. So you'll notice the battery level, just stop for a second. The battery level dropped 3 bars on the highway, and even with sustained sort of acceleration or just mild, you know, just resting my foot on the throttle for about 20 minutes or even half an hour, it didn't drop any lower than that. So that's kind of the lowest it will go, I think, with just sort of regular highway driving. If you're towing, obviously that's going to drop a bit quicker. But yeah, it seems to have some sort of safety net there where it won't let it drop too low. We've got a lot of potholes and things here. I'm just going to smash over the middle of them and just see how it handles. I do have my tripod in the back that's rattling about. That's not actually the car. But it's maintaining stability. I can still got steering. It's not bouncing all over the place. It is firm, but it's catching the bumps. Along a more mild corrugation, I'll just steer away from the potholes a bit. It's comfortable, yep. The front end feels planted. The back is jiggling about a little bit. Just trying to dodge some of those potholes. Yeah, I think that's a good balance. It is firm, but it's catching the bumps, and it's going to be able to withstand some load in the back at the same time. Okay, so back down to our normal loop. I should have taken everything out of the back. It's actually my fault because it's rattling around quite a bit, and it's actually making the car, it seemed like the car's rattling, whereas just my tripod and that baby seat. So through there, we've got some boggy section. Looks like there's a tree down too. We had a bit of wind in the recent days, so I'll see how I can get around that. Now down this way, we've got the little jump. It also looks like there's a tree down there too, actually. But we'll see how we go. This doesn't have a full-time four-wheel drive system. It's got rear-wheel drive, or H2 at the moment, and a normal H4 all-wheel drive system whereby the front and the rear are kind of locked together, or they are locked together. So you can't drive that on the tarmac, dry tarmac, or even wet, I suppose, unlike you can with a Triton and the V6 Ranger. So I think if Toyota jumped to a system where you could drive with four-wheel drive on the tarmac, like a 4A mode or whatever, I think that would actually really boost the capability of the HiLux. But again, they probably don't care. They're very conservative, and they don't want to complicate things too much. We do have a rear diff lock, but no front diff lock or anything like that, and we've got low range. Actually, I'll turn the traction control off as well. Yeah, there's a tree perfectly over the jump. Oh no. That's a bit of a shame. I really wanted to test this to see how the suspension would go. That's fallen down perfectly in the wrong spot. Anyway, we'll go around the other way, and we should be able to get access to this side, so we can still do the bog holes and everything over that side, and there's a steep little climb we can go through as well. If I had some tow straps or something, I could tie that tree up, and I've got a tow bar on the back. Could actually yank that out of the way. This is why you should always come prepared when you're off-roading. It brings about a good point, actually. You should always come prepared when you're off-roading. Bring water and so on, preferably take someone else with you. I know someone that lives quite close to here, and I've got phone service, so I can always just ring someone. I'll ring him up and he can come and help me. All right, that's starting to look pretty boggy now because it's sort of half dried and half not, but I might just smash through around this tree and just see what happens. The stability control or traction control is still flashing, which kind of slowed me down a little bit. I'd like to just turn that off completely. In boggy stuff, it's just the ABS because it is so slippery. I might turn that MTS system off, turn the stop start off, and if we hold down the traction button, it'll eventually have a orange light there. That should turn it off completely. But yeah, no trouble getting through. It pulled through with, didn't scrape the bottom or anything like that. I like the sense or the feeling you get when driving a Hilux, or even just any sort of robust big ute like this, because it just feels like it could go anywhere. You know, it's actually a little bit you've actually got to be careful that you don't just take on absolutely everything. But I've been around here multiple times, so I know what to expect. To some degree anyway. You've always got to be careful. If they've had a lot of rain or something, you've still got to be very careful. We've got some deer up the other side there, so we'll be careful of those. Oh, I've got actually a few of them down here too. So we'll use the hill descent control, or DAC, to get down this steep section. Very slippery. You can hear the brake. My feet are completely off the pedals, by the way, and it's just taking me down gradually, even though it is very slippery. And when you get to the bottom, you can just accelerate like normal, but if you do back off and you're going down a hill, it will re-engage. So we'll turn around and go back up that and see how it handles. Okay, back up again. Very slippery, and it is quite steep. It might not look like it on camera, but it is definitely quite steep. You'd slip over if you were trying to walk up here, especially in the mud. Oh, I've got that stability control back on again because I used the downhill assist. Yeah, it definitely goes better without traction control turned on, I think, like most SUVs or whatever four-wheel drives, because traction control hits, puts braking pressure on the wheels, so you don't want to slow down the wheels when you're trying to climb up something boggy. Definitely very slippery now. I'm going to do that again, and I'm going to lock the diff this time because I reckon it would go up that even easier, because just at the end there it's very boggy, and I think the left wheel, rear wheel, got caught in that little rut just here, and so it was spinning quite a bit. With the rear diff locked, the left and right are locked at the same time. So if one's got traction, then it's not going to spin the other wheel because that one is still firmly on the ground. So it just stops wheel spin. Okay, let's see if we can lock the diff just in 4H or H4. Some vehicles need to be in low range, while others, like the Ranger Raptor, you can actually lock the diff while you're still in two-wheel drive, so you can do some burnouts and donuts and whatever. Yeah, it's not letting me do that. I might have to put it into low range. Just put it into neutral just to free things up a bit. Here's something clunking down there. Then hit the diff lock. Yeah, so that's engaged. That doesn't let you use it until you're in low range. I mean, it makes sense. If you're really in a boggy situation, you're probably going to be in low range anyway. And who knows, maybe Toyota has figured out that locking the diff in 4H, you can build up a bit of speed, so maybe that's not reliable for a locked diff while you've got even 20-30 kilometers an hour, whereas if you're in low range, you're not going to be going much faster than sort of walking pace. I'll just leave it in D. Yeah, so definitely less wheel spin. It is revving, but that's just because I've got it in that low gearing. see how we go through here. And before I went over to the left here, yeah, it's very slippery, but it's not spinning as much. It still spins, but it's not, it didn't have that inside wheel or the left wheel spinning away the power. You can just hear it change back into 4H. We'll go back this way through this. I'll try a different line, and then we'll go back around to the other side and go through that the bog hole on the other side. We have had some rain, so it might be at a different level. We'll just see. I'll just attack this right in the guts pretty much. That's quite boggy. But yeah, pulling through, no problem whatsoever. It doesn't really have aggressive tyres on this either. I think the ground clearance, 265 millimeters of ground clearance is really good for this class. So it's not, you know, bellying out on these little mounds and things, and that drags the vehicle, you know, slows it down a little bit. That can contribute to bogging situations, especially on sand, where the belly's just rubbing into the ground and it's, yeah, just slowing it right down. It's so clumpy and sticky, like I can feel it in the steering. It starts to spin and then just grips on and then just spins again, and it'd be awesome to come through here with the Raptor really, and just, but it'd probably really rip up the terrain. So I'm just letting it go where it wants to go basically, just holding the throttle on just a little bit. I could probably go faster if I wanted to, but yeah, pulled through with no problem at all, which is what you'd expect for the HiLux. That's the thing with the HiLux, there's a lot riding on it. It has to be able to do stuff like this easily. So, but it is good to see that it does do it easily. Might as well go through again with the camera rolling. Try a different line again. Yeah, that's awesome. Just goes straight through. I mean, I'd love to try get an SUV through there. You know, just a typical, even like an MUX would be interesting actually, because they don't have a crazy amount of ground clearance. I think it would have no problem, but yeah, you wouldn't get a typical crossover or something like that through there, no way. It's always fun getting somebody else's car muddy. Okay, let's see how we go through here. It's not very deep at the moment. But it should give us a bit of a test to see if the diff scrubs out, because the two wheels drop in quite a bit. No, not really. Yeah, it's too shallow today. There we have it, the 2024 Toyota HiLux Rogue 48 volt mild hybrid. What do I think? Well, it's exactly what I expected. It just does whatever it's told. It doesn't have anything special about it, like the touchscreen and everything. It's all very basic. It doesn't come with extra features, and some of them are gimmicks like sand mode and off-road mode and rally mode and all that sort of stuff. It doesn't come with anything like that, but it just gets through anyway. It doesn't stuff around, you know, just, yeah, I can go through that. You don't need to push a sand button to get me through sand. Like, it will just do it anyway. So I think that's kind of Toyota's whole mantra, really. Like, it's very conservative, basic, but does everything, you know what I mean? And that's what I love about the HiLux. If I was going to buy a ute, I'm not in the market for a ute because I don't carry anything, but if you do need a ute, look, I'll just give you a ranking right now. The best ute on the market right now is the Ranger, in my opinion, because it comes with a V6 or optional with a V6. You can get the Raptor. It's got a great big touchscreen, very ergonomic inside, lots of practicality inside. It handles like an SUV and it goes anywhere as well. But for all-round capability, including resale and reputation for reliability, the HiLux wins. and it's the one I would buy. If I was buying a ute, I'd just buy an SR5. I wouldn't even think about it. I just know that's what I'd buy because of the reputation, but because I'm going to be using it as a workhorse, because that's the only reason I'd buy it, I know I can depend on it. It's just got so much reputation and history there. I'll just give you a quick story actually. So every year my family, or just my wife and kids, we go to this little cabin in the Blue Mountains, and there's 2 cabins up on this property that this elderly couple own. And they're from the city, you know, then they moved out and built these 2 cabins. It's nothing flash. They have an 80 series Land Cruiser that they've had since new. That's the paddock basher that they run around in. Well, not run around, but you know, that's where they go down to the other side of the property. They've also got a 2016 SR5. And he showed me this letter that Toyota sent him about the DPF issue. It just basically said, if you have any problems of whatsoever and have, you know, concerns here, bring it in and we'll fix it straight away. That's the kind of reputation that you don't get from a lot of the manufacturers, the other manufacturers. You know, imagine Jeep or something, Land Rover or Alfa Romeo sending you a letter saying, hey, you know, there could be a problem here, bring it in and we'll fix it if there is, but if there's not, don't worry about it. You know, your vehicle will be fine. That's the kind of attention to detail that I like for a vehicle like this. If I'm after a track vehicle or a racing car, whatever, it's different. But for a vehicle like this, I want it to be dependable. I'm going to be using it for work. And that's where I think the HiLux really wins. Customer respect and brand reputation. And if you have any horror stories about a Toyota actually, let me know in the comments. I've got horror stories about Land Rovers, Alfa Romeos. My neighbour owned an Alfa Romeo, had it for 10,000 kilometres, it broke down. She had a Volkswagen Golf as well and that broke down. It could be the way she's driving, I don't know. I've never actually heard a bad or horror story about a Toyota HiLux. I've heard the DPF issue, but as far as I know, they've fixed it pretty quickly. And if it's a problem, as the cabin owner said, like he can just take it in and get fixed. I think it's mainly a problem if you drive in the city, because DPFs in all vehicles, they don't like when you don't get the engine up to proper running temperature. They don't work properly and they get clogged up. And I think that was what was happening with the HiLuxes. They were driving around the city, builders and so on, just squirting about and turning it off straight away, causing it to choke up. Whereas, yeah, the guy that lives up in the cabin, he travels long distances every time he drives it, and he said he hasn't had any problems with it whatsoever. Anyway, the hybrid package, I wouldn't worry about it too much. It's just an accessory hanging off the engine. It's not integrated into the powertrain all that much. If you really don't like it, you could just take it off if you really wanted to. It's literally just an extra accessory on the engine. But I don't think it's worth worrying about. If it was a full hybrid system, then I would be more concerned, because when you're off-roading and so on, the electric motor could take over and give you different kind of engagement or different kind of feeling when you're driving it, whereas a diesel is very intuitive. You know what you're going to get when you put your foot down or take it off or whatever. Whereas this, it's just an accessory. It doesn't take over anything. It doesn't run in EV mode. I'm just speaking to those old school sort of traditional buyers that just want a tough old diesel, you know. I don't think the hybrid edition here, the mild hybrid edition, I think that's why Toyota has called it mild hybrid, or just 48 volt. I think the actual language they use, they don't call it a hybrid because they don't want it to be recognized as a hybrid. It's not that serious. Fuel economy is pretty good, you know, 9.7, but I've achieved better in other models with nothing in it. So it might be different when you're towing stuff. Maybe it stays at 9.7 when you're towing as well. I don't know. Don't have anything to tow, unfortunately, but it does use less fuel on paper. So that could translate, or it should translate to some sort of benefit in the real world as well. It might not be as big, but it should translate to some sort of benefit. All right, let's head out now to the private road and do some performance testing and see what it goes like. Just a pro tip actually, don't wear your best jeans when you're off-roading. Mine, I mean, they're not my best jeans, they're just my jeans. This is what I wear pretty much every day. But yeah, they get muddy pretty easily.